What's up guys? In this video I'm going to be talking about a camcorder that I don't really hear many people talking about on the internet, and it's the Canon Vixia HF G50. Something I've really noticed in the video community on YouTube is people really like shooting on DSLRs and mirrorless cameras a lot. I don't see very many people using camcorders. I do see people using like cheaper camcorders, but not necessarily the higher end like prosumer or cinema cameras and whatnot. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about just camcorders, portable camcorders. I've got one and I'll show you guys here in a second. But this camcorder in particular, the Canon HF G50, honestly I think needs to be talked about, because even though it may not run along the lines of the best specs in the world compared to other DSLRs and mirrorless cameras out right now, I don't even think it should be compared to those, because I think in its own has great quality, and surprisingly great quality, and for a not so bad price. So I think we're gonna check that out, and I can't wait for you guys to see, and maybe you guys will open your minds to using camcorders in your next film project. So let's do that. Alright, so first off, I guess we should get into the specs, because everybody loves specs, and I mean, that's pretty much what you guys came here for, right? So this camera is a 4K camcorder, and it actually has no crop. That's right, zero crop when you do 4K. And that's the great thing about camcorders, is that normally they don't have a crop if you have 4K. So that's a great thing about that. It shoots up to 4K 30 frames per second. It does not shoot 4K 60p, but in 1080p full HD it shoots up to 60 frames per second, and it is crystal clear because the 1080p is oversampled from that 4K sensor. So right off the bat it's going to give you a very sharp, clean image when you shoot in full HD. And at 60 frames per second you can slow that down and do really nice, smooth looking slow motion footage, and I'll show you guys some of that later in the video. But I think it's spectacular for what you're getting in this package. Okay, now call me a fanboy or a millennial or whatever, but I love the 24 frames per second mode in this camera. It is so smooth and cinematic looking. I mean, now I can't say I have much experience with lots of cameras. I'm very new to the videography world in general, but I love how smooth it looks. I'm using full HD 24 frames per second right now. That's what you're actually seeing me right now, and I mean, this is so nice. I love it. It's just, it looks cinematic to me. At least that's my opinion. Cinematic, there's lots of elements to a cinematic image, of course, but I love right off the bat how good it looks. It's very smooth, and I think that, I hardly ever shoot in 30 or 60 frames, because it just depends on what I'm trying to go for, but most of the time I'm shooting in 24 frames on this camera. Alright, so now let's talk about the lens on this thing, because honestly it's really good, and I want to say that this lens is probably the most expensive part of this camera. So it is an f1.8 to 2.8 3.67mm to a 73.4mm lens, and that's roughly a 29 to 627mm 35mm equivalent, which means you're getting that 20 times optical zoom, which means you're going to be able to zoom pretty far and get some faraway subjects at crystal clear focus. And I love that the maximum aperture is 1.8, because you can get really nice bokeh on this lens, and it's just very nice for shooting in lower light conditions. And the only thing is that it opens all the way up to 2.8 at the maximum. So, but you're still gonna get some good bokeh even at that, and just from my experience with this camera. Alright, autofocus on this camera is good. I will not say that it's the best autofocus, but it's very fast. They have some different modes. They've got instant, medium, and normal autofocus. But I will say that I usually keep the camera at the medium autofocus just because I feel like it's a little smoother than the instant. Sometimes in lower light conditions the autofocus isn't that great, and especially when you have the aperture open wider, it's not going to be that great in lower light conditions. So lowering that aperture and then also raising the ISO is going to definitely help when you're shooting in lower light. But even then, the ISO is very limited. You're only going to get from 100 to 2400 ISO. There is no extended ISO, and it's because the sensor is pretty small. The sensor on this camera is a 1/2/3, or I'm not even sure how you'd even say that. I don't think it's necessarily important to focus on the size of the sensor because it's also about the lens too, and this lens is beautiful in my opinion. This camera also can do manual focus, and what's really cool is that it has a ring around the lens that you can actually turn, and it's not mechanical, but it is electronic, and you can change the settings to be a smooth variable focus or to be just constant. But a lot of the time I leave it in autofocus, and the autofocus does pretty decent, so I like it. This camera also has built-in in-body stabilization, 5-axis stabilization, which means that the image stabilization is going to be really nice and smooth, and from my experience it's worked very well for all the projects that I've used it on. I usually have it set to dynamic mode, but there's also standard mode whenever it's for lighter movements. But for me, sometimes when I'm filming videos, I kind of have like jerky movements, and so it kind of helps to clean that up a bit and make it nice and smooth. And I love how smooth the footage turns out. It comes out like I'm using a gimbal or something, but it's great. Another good thing about camcorders is that right off the bat they come with fully articulating screens. And what's great about this camcorder in particular is it has the 3-inch touchscreen LCD display. So it makes it really nice for changing settings on screen and also being able to get a good view of what your image is going to look like in camera. And also we have a built-in electronic viewfinder, which also can tilt up or down, and it's a 1.5 million dot EVF. So that means that you're going to be getting a super crystal clear image, and it's going to help for shooting in bright conditions outside, because sometimes the sun is going to be too bright even for the screen to be able to see it clearly, and you want to be able to check focus and things like that. Then you'll be able to do that with that EVF very easily. Some of the best features that I find actually the most useful on this camera are focus peaking and zebras, and both of those are going to help to get a better exposure on the camera. The camera also has a light meter, and everything shows up on the LCD screen, which is very nice, very helpful when you're shooting on the go. But the great thing about focus peaking is that it's going to sort of outline certain areas of the image that are in focus, and it gives you a really good guide about what's in focus right now. Like I can tell there's a red outline around me, and that's showing that I'm in focus right now. I'm in autofocus right now, so it should be focused on me. It's tracking my face right now. It also puts a box around my face, which shows that it's tracking me, and I think the tracking autofocus on this camera is also really, really good. I haven't had any issues with that at all. Another great thing about camcorders, a lot of the prosumer camcorders, when you get into this price range of $1,000 and more, they're gonna give you audio ports like a headphone jack and an external mic jack just right off the bat, because a lot of people are gonna be vlogging, a lot of people are gonna be live streaming and wanting to use this for different things, different applications, but they want to be able to use audio. And sometimes some mirrorless cameras and DSLRs don't even give you an external mic jack or a headphone jack. So how would you be able to monitor or to be able to record with a different mic? You have to use the built-in mic, which a lot of them are crappy. And I will say that the built-in mic on this camera is nice. It does have stereo capability, but it's not really that great. I shouldn't even call it nice. I really shouldn't. It's not great. So I use an external mic, and that's what's plugged in right now, and that's why it sounds better. So that's what's really great about camcorders, and this one in particular. This camera also comes with a mini HDMI port for those who want to use this for live streaming. Now, I haven't used the live streaming function on this, but it's very simple. I've heard you just kind of just plug it in and then it works. And you can display it to a TV if you wanted to. This camera also comes with a removable battery pack and a charge cable. So you can charge the camera and run it at the same time if you needed to. In this situation, I don't have it plugged in, I have it running off the battery, but the battery can go for over 2 hours, and that's really great. It does continuous recording. There is no time limit on this, which is really great by camcorders. A lot of camcorders, they don't have a time limit. You just point, click record, and you let it run, and it'll go until the battery dies. So that's what I love about this. If you need to shoot long form content, this is a great camera for that. Honestly, this camera has limitations, but I think it also has some really great strong suits, and I think it could definitely be a great tool in somebody's arsenal for their next film project, for their next big movie, or for educational content. I've used this for all kinds of different purposes already. There's so many different options. I think it's really great what Canon did with this camera. I also think that it does have things that I would like to have. Like, I would like maybe a bigger sensor, like maybe more of like an APS-C sensor, but then you're gonna get really expensive. And the great thing about this is that APS-C sensors are known to overheat because there's more data, and this has a smaller sensor, so it's not gonna overheat. Normally camcorders don't overheat at all, so that's a great benefit of these as well. And for those who like to edit their images in post, which is something I like to do, I love using DaVinci Resolve, and you can use any video editing software with this footage, but they come out really nice. They're MP4s, and it's 8-bit footage, 8-bit color, but it's really good footage. It's not oversaturated, and you can edit it in post, and I think you can get some really good results, and I'll show some examples here too. But I love this camera, and I'm going to definitely continue to use it for the next few years, probably, until I get something new. I am thinking about probably getting like a mirrorless camera next, but honestly, I think this camera is great enough for what I'm doing right now, and I think it could be great enough for anybody else who is trying to do their next film project, or to do their next movie, or whatever it is, even interviews, and it could be used for any kind of application, I think. The problem is, we get so focused on, well, this camera is for this and this camera is for that, when I think that if it takes video in it, then use it. And if you like the way it looks, use it. That's all I'll have to say about that. I appreciate you guys for watching this. My name is Matthew Whitlock, also known as Jolly Green, and I hope you guys have a great day. Peace.